What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. This is the Discovering Bob Dylan podcast. Joe here with Dylan, as always. We're talking about Desire today. 1976, Dylan's follow-up to Blood on the Tracks, which you got to watch the last episode. It was a tour de force by us covering everything, every possible nuance and little aspect of Blood on the Tracks. That was our magnum opus. That was the last episode, but now we're moving on to Desire, which is another popular Bob Dylan. It doesn't quite have the critical standing as Blood on the Tracks does. Few things on this planet do. But this was an extremely popular record from Dylan. I believe it was number 3 in the UK, and it might be his best-selling album over there. It won NME's Album of the Year in '76. It's on Rolling Stone's top 500 albums of all time. It sold a bunch of copies. It's a very well-known, respected album. It has Hurricane on it. So even, the lay person, the regular folk will, have at least an inkling of what Desire is about from Hurricane, which you can hear on classic rock radio. It's one of the couple Dylan songs that they'll bust out every once in a while. You love Blood on the Tracks, and this is not Blood on the Tracks. This is like the opposite in many ways. And it has a little bit of the same DNA, but what are your feelings on Desire? Where does it land for you in the catalog?
I don't think it will be a big surprise to a lot of people. Me being a big Bob Dylan fan, that this one ranks pretty highly for me. Most certainly a top 10 Dylan record for me. And yeah, maybe overall it doesn't always get the same critical lauding that Desire does, but definitely very well thought of. I think that most people who are casual Dylan fans, they think about the Electric Trilogy, maybe Freewheelin', and then usually Blood on the Tracks and Desire. And there's quite a few people within our community who I know rank it as their favorite Dylan record. I know our friend Rich Latta, who is a frequent commenter here. I believe it's his favorite. It's our buddy Max's favorite. It is our buddy Ausmund from Norway. I believe it's not only his favorite Bob Dylan record, I believe it's his favorite album of all time by anyone. So yeah, definitely well thought of among Dylan fans like myself. And I think this is a pretty good record to show somebody who might not normally love Dylan, which is why I've really been trying to keep my expectations for you in check here, because expectations are just predetermined disappointments. I can't lie and say my expectations are set at a certain place, but before we get there, do you have anything about the history of this record that you want to share? Because there's some pretty cool lead up to this record, and then certainly the immediate aftermath of it.
Yeah, this one has some lore behind it, and typical sort of, I don't know if it's just like sloppiness or just it's like whatever Dylan wants to do seems to work out, but the way he gets there is just bizarre. I mean, he had been separated from his wife Sarah. Blood on the Tracks wasn't the ending, it wasn't the clothing of their marriage. They were still technically together, but they were separated, and they were doing whatever. I don't know. They weren't hanging out on the farm like they used to. So Dylan, for one thing, has a collaborator, Jacques Levy. And a fun anecdote was when they met and he, found out Dylan wanted him to like collaborate with him. And he was like, I usually write the lyrics, which is hilarious because but totally true as well. Like if you met Bob Dylan, he's like, hey, I want to collaborate, be like, I write lyrics, Bob. Like you're the greatest. Like, and he's like, no, you write some lyrics. Why not? So
You meet Hemingway and he wants to write a book with you.
yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, well, do you want me to like color the pictures or what? Like, no, you write it. I'll do the binding and the printing.
Yeah.
Makes no sense, but Dylan wanted to do some different stuff. He also, one of the collaborators on this record, Emmylou Harris, from what I could read, Dylan had no idea who she was just like randomly, hey, I need a girl singer. Like, oh, Emmylou's recording Elite Hotel next door. Bring her on down. And, she didn't even know the music. She had the lyric sheet, and then supposedly Bob would just like poke her when he wanted her to sing. So, okay. You stumble into Emmylou Harris. You got, a playwright helping you to write lyrics. Scarlet Rivera, who does the violin and very well. He had never heard her play, and he saw a violin case apparently and was like, "Hey, bring her on down." And she was kind of hesitant because she was like, "I don't just like go with people." I don't know if it was like his secretary or whatever, his handler who wanted her to come down, and she was like, "Who are you? Like, what the hell?" She joined up, and also Bob was looking to do like a little bigger sound. So the first time everyone got together in the studio, it was a 20-person, like orchestra. Eric Clapton was there, Dave Mason from Traffic was there. And it's just like, where is all this stuff coming from? But in typical Dylan fashion, it all kind of worked out. A lot of the members kind of went home because Dylan was like, or I don't know who actually was like, hey, this isn't working, but it wasn't working. And somebody suggested, hey, let's get a real small group together. It might have been Don DeVito, who was the producer. Maybe. It's another thing. Typical Dylan. He's credited on the record as could have been produced by Don DeVito. So could have
Yeah.
been him. Who knows? But they whittled it down to a small group and just sort of the core players. But we did get Romance in Durango out of that kind of larger group. That was the one song that made it from that recording session. And there were a couple more recording sessions with the smaller group where most of the songs came from. And then finally, Hurricane was recorded a couple, like 3 months later in October.
Mhm.
So a weird way to put it all together. I'm sure I'm missing some key facts here, though.
The catalyst for all of it was Dylan seeing, at the time, unknown to the general public, performer named Patti Smith in New York, who had yet to record an album, or at least release an album, but she was already getting so much buzz in the scene there because it was like, you gotta go see this girl. She's an amazing performer, and her band is just unbelievable. And Dylan went, and that was very much the catalyst for it. Yeah, if I remember correctly, his thought process was like, man, I've really only ever played with one rock and roll band ever, the band, initially the Hawks, who previously existed before me. Yeah, I've never really put together my own band. I've had pickup bands in the studio for some of these records, but I don't think any of them really qualify as rock and roll groups. So I thought that was a cool sort of catalyst for all this. And then eventually, what followed, like you said, Hurricane being the last song recorded for the record in October 75. And then in December, the first leg of the Rolling Thunder Review starts. And we mentioned that a little bit in the last episode. And by we, I mean I mentioned it in the last episode. And Rolling Thunder Review is something that really we should touch more on, I think, next episode, just because it all technically happens after this album is recorded. But the tour is very much a part of the vision that he had going into recording this album, and the sound is eventually expanded. He's joined by Mick Ronson on the tour, who's in the band, and then he also picks up Joan Baez and Roger McGuinn and Ramblin' Jack Elliott and so many other people along the way. And it's really cool. It's really fascinating. But that is how the whole process starts, beginning with Desire. What do you think, Joe? What do you think of Desire?
Before we get into it, I have a trivia factoid for you. I want to know if you know this. And we haven't talked about the covers for the albums much lately.
It's been a minute. Yeah.
Do you know what the cover of Desire is based on? It is an homage.
Is it John Phillips, Mamas and the Papas?
Yes, his first solo album, John the Wolf King of
Yeah.
LA.
Papa John.
Yeah.
Great guy. Great
Fantastic
guy.
guy, so I've heard.
Probably about as good of a guy as one of the guys that a song on Desire is about that we'll get in
Yeah.
a second.
One of the possible missteps.
Yeah.
But yes, it is a very cool looking cover, and
Mhm.
unfortunately it's a total jackass who he's homaging, but he didn't know that at the time. We'll we'll forgive Bob for that.
Yeah.
All right,
Bob
so
reclaimed the cover for
yeah, that's
us.
right. That's right.
So
Yeah.
thank you, Bob.
All right, so the album itself, it's very different from Blood on the Tracks, but it does have a little bit of that repetition that he establishes again on Blood on the Tracks. This time, I like the music aspect here a lot more than I did on Blood on the Tracks. Lyrically, it's very different. It's not even, other than the final song, Sarah, which is very much about his soon-to-be ex-wife. Uh, but
You think?
sorry, Bob, I shouldn't poke fun. And one of the two songs written only by Bob Dylan. Everything else has some Dylan, some Jacques in it. So it's an interesting, different style at some point. Something like Black Diamond Bay, which has like multiple narrators, and it sort of comes from a different place than you would normally get the Bob Dylan experience, which makes it interesting. Hurricane, obviously, everybody knows that. It's the big famous. It is 8 minutes and 33 seconds, and I will say it doesn't drag. And a lot of credit has to go to Scarlet Rivera on this, and she's sort of the piece that is missing for me on Blood on the Tracks. That soloist, someone to make those little fills, make all the make the verses all flow together, but also adding like enough color. Those gypsy little violin runs and stuff are really cool. It's a really great sound. Dylan just stumbled into that, so I don't know how much credit I'm going to give him. I'm going to give the credit to Scarlett on this one. The gypsy side violin's great. The bass line is really cool at the end. I noticed a lot more musical aspects on this album. Rob Stoner, some cool bass work. It seems like these songs breathe a little bit more as well because it's not so lyrically focused. Like there's more space. Like you have that outro on Hurricane where, kind of Bob's voice fades away and you get this cool big stomping bass line come in and you kind of weaves in with the violin. There's some really great drumming. I love the sound of the drums on this. The production on them is really cool. They're very loud and big and full, which is good. A song like Hurricane, that melody is so strong that even though it's repeated, ad nauseum, it still works. And I love Dylan's vocals on that. Reminds me a little bit of like the 60s stuff where he would get going and just like he almost at a frenzy and he's going throughout this song. Compelling story, obviously. It's exciting. I like the historical stuff, going back to times they are changing, less personal stuff all the time. He's talking about Hurricane Carter, the famous boxer who was wrongly jailed, having that sort of outside of Dylan's own life is a little refreshing for me. I like that. Isis, a good one. Strong violin again. This I believe was recorded or written on piano, which I always like. I like Dylan's piano playing. I wish he did more of it. So you get that on Isis. Love the big drums. Couple songs, Mozambique, which apparently was just them trying to rhyme as many things with beak or ambeak or whatever. You get the nice harmonies between Emmylou and Bob, but I don't love Bob's singing. It's a little like stilted during the verses, and Not one of my favorite tracks there. One More Cup of Coffee, though, obviously very strong. It has like almost, I read like they were saying it was like a gypsy sound to it. To me, it sounds almost Middle Eastern, like a little mystical, little, Arabian Nights almost. Bob's doing some interesting wailing with his vocals, which I didn't like at first, but it kind of grew on me. It's very passionate, very searching. You kind of, feel it. And, I like that he's trying something new and having a presence like Emmylou, sort of like how Scarlet Rivera violin expands the musical palette. Emmylou's backing vocals really expand. It's that like pretty element that sometimes is missing for me from Bob's. His vocals are good, but they're a little dry. I don't always feel them as much as I should. With Emmylou there, like I feel it a little bit more in my soul. I love her in general. I mean, everything she's done, all her work with Graham Parsons before he died, and her solo stuff. She just adds a lot of color to the whole proceedings here. So I really appreciate her backing vocals. Oh Sister, kind of a throwaway for me. I don't quite get that one. Uh-oh. I upset Dylan on that. We'll get back to you. You can tell me what that one's all about. Joey is sort of like Hurricane if Hurricane was guilty. Like it's about some gangster. Apparently, he's a real person, and I guess Jacques wrote these lyrics. At least that's what Bob claims. He was basically like a mafioso type dude. So they bring in some Italian sounding, Mediterranean instruments, a bouzouki, accordion, mandolin. It kind of has that like Godfather mafioso sound to it. I like the way that sounds with like the Western country-ish style that Dylan and Emmylou bring, but it also makes me think of Billy Joel a lot because he brings in that Italian sound. He did his little Western stuff on Piano Man. So Joey's okay. It's a little long. The subject matter was a bit. Yeah, I think that was one of the things that critics pounced on back when this originally came out. I know what's his face from Cream.
Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker.
No, Cream the magazine.
Oh, Lester Bang.
Yeah, Lester Bangs wrote a scathing column about this that song. So I don't know, Joey, not the greatest there, but I do think it has a strong musical element to it, and you know, at 11 minutes, you think I'd get super tired of it, but kind of like Hurricane, like there's enough music there, like the palette is so much larger that I don't mind it nearly as much as even shorter songs on, even the superior Blood on the Tracks. I would tire of these songs and the repetition. I think that aspect is just much better fleshed out on this one. And some other, Romance in Durango. eh, it's another one where I kind of struggle with a little bit. It's got like mariachi vibes. Dylan's doing some forced accent. I don't really notice Clapton that much. I guess that could be a good thing, depending on how you like Clapton. Black Diamond Bay, I think is really pretty. I like the vocal cadence a lot. Nice violin, very catchy melody. And I think Emmylou and Bob have the best sounding paired vocals here, the harmonies. She's kind of like dipping and ducking and weaving in her vocals. It's not like a straight, here's two people singing together. Dylan will sing the verse and then she'll kind of color in some lyrics and they come together on the chorus really nice. I think it's a very pretty song, cool, lyrically, just different, which I like. And then you get the devastating closer, Sarah, which I don't know if this is like his last chance to win her back. Like, hey, I've tried everything else. I'm just gonna put it all out there. No beating around the bush. This one is called Sarah. It is directly, about Sarah. I'm throwing in, a throwback to Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands in there. Like I'm putting it all on the line. Lyrically, just excellent. I will say it really reminds me of Blood on the Tracks, just the level of detail, the way he does like the scenes from his life, and then, the plea to get her back. The last one, the Sarah, oh Sarah, glamorous nymph with an arrow and bow. That's a great line. Sarah, oh Sarah, don't ever leave me, don't ever go. Like he's serious about this. And it did not work because they got divorced, but a hell of a shot. That is a fadeaway three-pointer from the corner from Bob there. Maybe it forced overtime, but he did not win that one. Um,
Quick, off the top of your head, better eponymous failure to win back a lover, Sarah by Bob Dylan or the failed Paula album by Robin Thicke after the Blurred Lines controversy?
I'm gonna give this one to Dylan. You named one album that yeah, no question here. Not his Layla. Layla worked, right? Or did Layla did work or did
Well, it ultimately did, but Clapton and Patty weren't together
yeah.
really yet. So
Yeah,
different
yeah,
circumstances.
different. All right, you're right. So overall, I like this album. I don't know, people were really talking this one up, and there are a couple songs on here I just do not get. I think the highs are really high. The lows are a little forgettable for me. And I don't know if there's too many Bob Dylan albums where I just kind of like will brush off songs. But I don't know, Mozambico's Sister, Romance in Durango really just didn't hold my interest that much. So I don't know what I'm missing there. I think it's a great sounding album. I think the way he stumbled into, the expanded musical palette, I think is impressive, whether he meant to do it just this way or not. He wanted a different sound. He got it. He got some really good playing from everybody. The drums by Howard Wyeth are fantastic. The bass from Rob Stoner. Scarlet Rivera's violin's excellent. And it's well played, well sung. I don't know. It's good. I wasn't blown away. And I don't know, to me, it's probably 4 stars, but I don't know. I don't know if I enjoyed it as much as like Planet Waves or some of the pre-Blood on the Track stuff. Yeah, see that's hurtful to people. And the way everyone is, having this, top three, this is my favorite Bob Dylan album. I don't know if that skewed my expectations a little too much, but it's a good album. I enjoy it, but it's not one of my favorites of 1976, probably. It's probably maybe bottom 25 if landing at all. I don't know. I don't know what I'm missing, what I wanted out of this album, and what I expected. Maybe I hate saying that Emmylou Harris there hurts it, but it does invite comparisons to things like Grievous Angel to me. And I know it's not the same thing. It's not cosmic country, anything like that. But maybe I wanted it to be. Maybe I wanted it to be a little more different than the standard Dylan album because as much as you add the violin and the little extra, the accoutrements here, it's still very much a Bob Dylan album. And it has all the hallmarks of a Bob Dylan album, for better or worse. And maybe I was wanting a little more outside the Bob Dylan box. Instead of a very good Bob Dylan album, maybe I wanted, somebody else to do an album with all these, having a different lyricist, having, a producer, having a different sound, a larger sound, less focus on the lyrics in some cases, more musicality. I don't know. It's still just unmistakably Bob Dylan to me. And I think that has a ceiling at this point.
Well, yeah. So the curse of the expectations does strike yet again in multiple ways, both my own personal letdown that this isn't your new favorite album of all time by anyone. But it's funny. Literally, was just talking about this today with some other people. on the server, when somebody really pushes something on you, it can be so hard sometimes to love it as much as you want to, or you think they want you to. I mean, for years, it has taken me so long to really become a Radiohead fan, not because I don't like Radiohead. In fact, I've always liked Radiohead, but hearing people talk about them in a certain way and then having my own experience listening to it, I was just like, well, I'm not like being lifted off the ground by this. So am I wrong here? Like, what's going on now? And I can say that now that Cramser's not a part of this channel anymore. Uh, so I get it. I am much obviously higher on the record than you, but all things equal, we agree on most things. Other than, I think "Oh Sister" is a gorgeous song. I think that lyrically, it's just a really beautiful kind of plea for kindness, and a lot of really cool biblical imagery. We're not too far off from the Christian years, but obviously you can see going back to John Wesley Harding even before. Bob is well read with his religious texts, and I think there's a bit of that in "Oh Sister," and I thought you would love "Oh Sister" for having the bridge on the album. We grew up together from the cradle to the grave, where both him and Emmylou are just all the way fully out there, and it sounds amazing. I think it's a beautiful song. And there's also a great moment on the Rolling Thunder Review bootleg series where someone in the audience yells, "Play a protest song." He said, "Okay, here's a protest song," which is funny because he's just recorded Hurricane. He's going to play you his newest protest song, but instead he sings a song that is basically about, hey, be nice to me and I'll be nice to you. Other than that, like I mentioned in the last episode, this album feels like such a singular work in his catalog to me, despite you saying that it feels distinctly Bob Dylan. And I kind of understand what you're saying, but sonically, I just don't think that any other album of his really sounds anything like this. And given the circumstances prior to and after its recording, I think it's unlikely that he could have made a similar record unless he chose to do so sometime during the Rolling Thunder review. So since he didn't do that, this just really feels like lightning in a bottle to me. And a big part of that, thank you. I'm very glad that I am not the one that has to bring first attention to Scarlet Rivera and Emmylou Harris, because they are the MVPs of this record. Just unbelievable. And Rob Stoner and Howie Wyatt, the bassist and the drummer, they go on to be a part of the Rolling Thunder Review band. Very solid rhythm section, and I agree the sound of both the bass and the drums in this record are great. So shout out to Don DeVito for his work there. But there's no electric guitar on this record. I know that it says Clapton's on Romance and Durango, but I you know I guess you can maybe kind of hear it if you listen closely, but that is not what anyone hears listening to it. There's no electric guitar on this album, and other than Bob playing piano on Isis, there's no keyboards, there's no organ, there's no nothing, and yet this album sounds so big and so huge. And I think a big part of that is this frenzied violin playing from Scarlet Rivera and Emmylou Harris. I mean, for my money, nobody before or after this record has sounded as good singing with Bob. He's a hard guy to sing with, and she is right there with him. I mean, and of course, it's friggin' Emmylou. She sounds great with him. She sounds great with Graham Parsons. She sounds great by herself, singing with whoever. Like, she's just incredible. Yeah, you throw in a mandolin here, an accordion here, the right amount of reverb. I think it's a really exotic production. I appreciate you kind of calling out. There's some South American, Central American influences, and kind of, yeah, like almost a Middle Eastern feel on One More Cup of Coffee. I think it's one of the finest atmospheres in his whole catalog. You know, Hurricane, I think, is such a bold album opener. It's 8.5 minutes long. The subject matter is controversial. Multiple curse words, which makes it even funnier that it is one of the songs that you hear on the radio. Bob doesn't swear a whole lot, but he's very pointed in this song. You just feel like you're shot out of a cannon as soon as he starts singing, and the intensity never lets up. I agree. If you were about to say, I don't know, it drags a bit, I was gonna pull the bullshit card on you immediately. Like, this song is so relentless. One of my favorite album openers. It's maybe not an all time. Might not crack my top 50 Dylan songs, but I absolutely love it. And his writing, I think him and Jacques Levy do such a great job. Bob is obviously one of the greatest storytellers in his own right, but to collaborate with somebody who hones in even more on the narrative aspect of things is so impressive. You mentioned that there wasn't a lot in common thematically with Blood on the Tracks, and I mostly agree with that, but my favorite track on the record is Isis. And what I love about Isis, I love so much about it. I agree with you. I love when Bob plays piano. I love Scarlet's violin. I love the whole sound of it. But what I really love about it is that it's very distinctly, when you listen to the other songs, something like Black Diamond Bay or even Hurricane and Joey, it's very clearly a Dylan Levy composition. It is this kind of big rolling story, but it's about this guy who gets married and is almost immediately like, I can't do this. And he goes away and he goes on this adventure. But the whole time he's still thinking about this woman, and I got to return to her. I got to get back to her. Isis, oh, Isis, what drives me to you is what drives me insane. It's so even in the crevices of these stories, there's a little bit of it creeping in, and I think that is so cool. I'm kind of with you on Mozambique and Romance in Durango. I like both of them. I think Mozambique is really joyous, and I'm not against a good rhyme exercise. I like Blinded by the Light just fine. Um, Romance in Durango, the Rolling Thunder review version. I almost guarantee that when I send you the Rolling Thunder review version, you'll be like, "Oh, okay, this is the shit. This is cool." Yeah, Joey's the black mark on the record for me. It's weird. It's far and away the weakest track for me, and I still don't dislike it because I agree with you. Musically, I think it's so wonderfully dramatic. Like, the drums are so heavy on it, and it's like, oh my God, how could they have cut this poor innocent mob boss down? you know, Emmylou sounds amazing on it. Dylan sounds great on it. But the tale is old as time, and we're gonna see a lot more of this coming up in the 80s too, where you look at a song like Joey and you think, oh, you put this on the record, but he had another song in his back pocket called Abandoned Love, which I made a mistake by not sending to you before it. I'll make sure I send it to you after this. And I think you'll agree when you listen to it, you'll say, Mozambique made the record and Joey made the record, but this didn't make the record. Just a incredible song, not making the album. But I don't know. It's an excellent collection of songs overall. I think it's melodically rich. You pointed out One More Cup of Coffee. That is a very daring melody for Bob. And interestingly, one of the two songs that he wrote by himself. But he comes in hot, like in his upper register, and he's yeah, kind of doing those Middle Eastern bends. Yeah, and it's awesome. I think his voice sounds incredible on this record. I think he really hello. I agree. He shifts back and forth between kind of this full throated shouting, uh, but also a lot of controlled melodicism. And I think the timbre of his voice sounds great. It sounds great up against Emmylou's voice, and then the whole thing is arranged so well. Like I said earlier, it sounds so big. For it to sound as big as it does with essentially no keyboard and no electric guitar, I think is a true production triumph. All the players on the record are great. And to me, it stands as a companion piece to one of the best and musically fruitful periods of his career. So I really love it. Definitely a little disappointed that you feel a little disappointed by it, but I'm glad that there are at least a handful of songs here that you enjoy.
Yeah. Disappointed, it's a loaded word. The fact that all of these Dylan records I think I'm enjoying is enough. It should be enough for you people. There's nothing,
Sorry.
sending me down a spiral here. So I think it's another win. I didn't realize there's no electric guitar. That kind of blows my mind now that you mention it because it sounds full. I don't know, maybe the acoustic. Is it just one like track? Are they doubling, tripling? Like is it because it sounds so big. Like there's no no way.
I mean,
So
yeah, there's some mandolin here and there. Like I say, I know there's some accordion here and there, but I'm telling you, man, there's something about that violin that really brings it all together. I think it is truly a triumph in production and arrangement for it to sound that big, and auxiliary percussion, but I don't think anyone's gonna mistake a shaker for an electric guitar. So
that's pretty cool. All right. Well, it doesn't change my score, but it is something to keep in mind. And so that's it. That is it for Dylan for about 20 years until again, the late 80s. Right? I mean, we can write him off. There's not a lot more to discover in this period. No, untrue. Tell me more.
untrue. Well, I will force you, even if just for 5 minutes at the beginning of next episode, to talk about the Rolling Thunder review for two reasons. Firstly, because I think it's about as Joe core as Dylan gets in the 70s. And secondly, because I do think it's just such an important part to his story. It is the companion piece to Desire. And in some ways, I think it kind of telegraphs where he goes with the next studio album. It comes out 2 years later, also produced by Don DeVito, Street Legal. And Street Legal is a really interesting record. One of, I would venture to say, just given for when it comes out, I wouldn't say it's the most forgotten record in Dylan's catalog, but the records before it are so well renowned. And then immediately after it is where the Christian trilogy starts. And that's such a sticking point. Like when you talk about Bob Dylan, it's like, oh yeah, he went electric and then he was a protest singer, and then he had a Christian phase, and then he had a comeback. It's kind of one of those things. But sandwiched in between there is this album. And to that extent, I think it's one of the more forgotten about ones. A favorite of your co-host Jason's. Very interesting record. The first true post-divorce record. I'm gonna assume you don't have any familiarity with Street Legal.
I've heard snippets. I don't know if I actually listened to the whole thing. I may have 10, 12 years ago. I all I remember is copious female backing vocals. So that's that's about it.
Well, what I'll tell you going into this is because I can see this going a few different ways. I guess what I'll tell you to keep in mind is what you just said earlier about, I think what I kind of wanted with Desire was, it still feels such like a Bob Dylan album to me. And I almost wish like someone did everything else. I'm not going to say that that's what Street Legal is, but I want you to keep that in the back of your head. I'm interested to see what you think of the sound of Street Legal. And this is one I know that you generally like to think about things as they fall in the context of the year. I want you to think about Street Legal. I want you to think about 1978 in general. I want you to think about the ethos of Bob Dylan and how much you think that comes out in Street Legal, at least from a sonic standpoint, because from a compositional standpoint, lyrically, I think it's a very, very interesting, fascinating record. We'll talk about that separately, but sonically, yeah, just going with an open mind here and see how you feel.
All right, yeah, that's one I'm looking forward to. I know Jason liked it. He might have been in his top five in 78, or he referenced it at some point.
Yeah.
And he and I usually have pretty close tastes in the 70s. So if he likes it a lot, perhaps I will as well. So that'll be next episode, talking about Street Legal, talking about the Rolling Thunder Review. The last time before we get all Christian like in 1979. But yeah, one more Street Legal. I hear people talk about it glowingly in certain places. So looking forward to that one. But let's get back to Desire. Not us. We're done with Desire, but the people out there watching. How do you feel about Desire? Where does it rank for you in the Bob Dylan catalog? Is it a companion piece of Blood on the Tracks? It is, is it the same level? Is it a big step down? Is it a direction you didn't want to see Bob go? Leave your thoughts in the comments. As always, we appreciate and love, love reading every single one of them letter by letter. Just can't get enough of those sweet, sweet comments. So keep them coming. Let us know how you feel about this show and all that stuff. Check the description for all the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Follow us there. My God, I forgot to say, slam that subscribe button, baby. We're doing it for the subscribers. So you gotta subscribe to the channel so you can get the content you crave. And all the other stuff, the Patreon,
Donate
the
to the pay. Come talk to us on a more regular basis.
we're on Discord, baby. Come
Come on,
chat.
all
I'm there.
kinds. So much discourse.
Yeah, discourse on Discord. I'm there way too much. Dylan often there as well. So if you want, pick our brains, hop in there. And yeah, get ready for Street Legal, baby. That's coming up next time here on Discovering Bob Dylan podcast. We'll see you then.